I know, you start using Framer but you're like, how do I create a navigation bar from scratch? A navigation bar that is responsive and adopts to different screen sizes seamlessly. Well, in this quick video, this is what we're learning. I'm going to show you the structure that all Framer experts use when it comes to responsive navigation bars, with some extra tips and common mistakes to look out for. Without any further ado, let me introduce myself. My name is Navi. This is Framer University, and let's get started. So I want to make sure that this video is super easy to follow along with, so I'm going to break it up into 6 sections. In the first section, we're going to create the base of our navigation. Then in the second section, we're going to turn it into a component, so we can then create different variants of this navigation for different viewports. So let's say we have a desktop version, a tablet, and a phone version. Actually, we're just going to have a desktop and a phone version. Then we're going to actually insert it into our website with layout templates, which is a new Framer feature, but it's going to be pretty simple, nothing complicated. Then we're going to take a look at a couple of mistakes beginners are making when creating these navigation bars, such as z-index and positioning issues. Then we're going to see how we can create full height navigations that take up the full height of our mobile phone when we open down the navigation. At the end, we are going to take a look at navigation effects, such as when you start scrolling down, the navigation disappears and slides to the top, and when you start scrolling back to the top, it just appears. So it's going to be a really comprehensive video about navigation bars in Framer, so I hope that you're going to learn a lot. Make sure to go down to the description and remix the project. You're going to find a starter page that I'm going to show in a minute, so you can start building with me. And yeah, make sure to stick around until the end and learn with me. So without any further ado, let's jump into the first section and start creating the base of this navigation bar. So here we are in the project. As you can see, it already has a little page here. Again, you're going to find a remix link in the description. You can remix this project. You can go to pages on the left and starter. You're going to see the exact same thing that I'm seeing right here, and you can start building with me. So we're going to add our navigation to this page. Start creating the base. First, of course, we're just going to press F on our keyboard and draw a little frame. I'm actually not going to start building inside the breakpoint because it is a little bit harder to work in there because we already have some elements there. We might be clicking elements that we don't want to click. It's much easier to work here on the canvas. And actually, this is why Framer is pretty cool, because you have an infinite canvas and you can build things anywhere you want to. So this is going to be the navigation frame, so we can also call this navigation. And we can set a height of 60 pixels or something like that. And yeah, usually my navigations are black. I like black, so something like this, maybe with a little transparency, so it's a little bit see-through, 95% perhaps. And then I usually also like setting a little BG blur, so the background below the navigation is blurred a little bit, so maybe BG blur 8 is set on this navigation frame. So then if I start adding elements within this, so let's say I drew a frame and I place it within, you're going to see that it is going to be placed absolutely within this navigation, which is not really great for us. What we would need is to make sure that this frame within is positioned relatively, but that option is not really available for us. The reason for this is because the navigation is actually not a stack, so we have to turn it into a stack. With most frames in Framer, we have to do this. We actually have to turn most of our frames into stacks. We can do that on the right panel by clicking the layout button here, or this little plus button next to the layout. So now what you'll notice is that the element that we placed within is jumped into its relative position. Now relative positioning is actually available. We can still, if you want to, choose absolute positioning, but relative will be much better for us because it allows us to set width to fill, for example. So now this frame within fills up the width of the navigation. So as it adjusts, the frame within also adjusts with it, which is great because this navigation will be, getting the width of the website. We'll set it up like that. And then this frame within will also be changing with it really nicely. This frame within actually will be called content because all the content will be placed within this frame. Now we're going to remove the fill color from this on the right panel because we don't really want it to be white. And then we're going to turn this as well into a stack by clicking this plus button next to the layout. Now every single element that I place within this will also be relatively positioned, and you'll see that if I duplicate these, they'll be nicely like ordered like this right next to each other. I can also reorder them with the arrow keys, so I can start putting some elements within, such as logo, links, and maybe a button. So let's start with the logo. I'm going to go into Figma and just copy my logo. So right click and copy as SVG. This is how I usually get my logos. This basically copies an SVG code to your clipboard that you can just simply paste in Framer with Command and V, and now you can see that you have your logo here. I showed this because I get many questions. Natalie, how do I get this logo? How do I paste it into Framer? It's that simple. You just copy the logo and paste it into Framer. An extra thing that you can do is you can actually use my SVG component. So within this file, you can go to Assets, and on here you'll find the Framer University folder. Inside of that, the SVG component. If you drag and drop this, you'll see it already has my logo. But essentially what this does, this component, is that you can paste the SVG code that we're copying from Figma here. So let's say we have another logo. I'm going to go to this other project. I think I have Framer logo somewhere. Where is the Framer logo? So if I copy another logo, so the Framer logo, let's say, copy as SVG, I can go to the right panel of this SVG component and just paste the SVG code here. The reason why this is a better option in my opinion is because this component is much more flexible. You have the sizing options here. You might unlock with fill if you place it within a stack. As you can see, with fill is unlocked. With a regular graphic layer, you cannot really do that. As you can see, the size is a little bit limited here. You cannot actually set like fill or anything like that here. You can see it's a little bit different. So yeah, SVGs are a little bit limited in Framer. That's why we might want to use the SVG component from the left assets panel. It is also available on the Framer University website if you go to the resources page. But yeah, enough of talking about the SVG component. Let me just grab this SVG again and paste it within this. And then we're gonna essentially use this SVG and paste it within the content frame of our navigation after resizing it to 24 by 24. So I'm gonna just drag and drop, and there we go. It is placed within the content frame of the navigation. Then the next elements could be the links that we're placing within this content. So how do we create links in Framer? Well, the first option is to just press T on our keyboard. So we switch to the text tool. You can see it here on the top panel. And then, you can see it here on the top bar. And then just simply click within the content frame and start writing. So maybe I write resources and I quickly select all of these text with Command and A, and then set the color here on the right panel to white so we can actually see it. So you can see that now we have a text layer, and we can change the font properties here. So maybe we can make it a little bit smaller, 14. Maybe I want to change the color to a little bit of a gray or like a darker one. And yeah, now we have this. Maybe it will be medium. And we have this little text layer here. And the way we can add the link to this is by going to the right panel, clicking the link, and then just linking to a page. So maybe Framer.University. Now you can see that the color of the text layer changed a bit. So if I undo this, you'll see that how it is basically changing the color as soon as this link is added. The reason for this is because this style, this link style, is actually getting assigned as soon as a text layer has a link. As you can see, I can actually edit this style and set the default color for the link, and then the hover color, as well as the current color. Current color will essentially be displayed when we are on the page where this is linking to. So let's say if we have a resource page here on this project, which we don't really have, but we have, let's say, a starter, And then when we are on the starter page and we set a current color to red, this text will be red on the starter page. But we don't really want that. I'm going to remove this red color, and I'll also link back to framer.university. So here I can set a color. Let's say we're going to use this 500 neutral, and then the hover color will be white. So if I hover over this, let me just put it inside of our desktop just for a second so we can test it. If I hover over this, you can see it gets the new color and also has a little underline. It is also basically coming from this style. You can see the decoration underline is set right here. So this is one way of creating links in Framer, but there's another way that I might prefer, which is actually removing the link from the text itself. So we don't have to mess around with all of these link styles and everything, but in some cases that might be what you need with like the current style and everything. But in this case, I'm going to remove it and I'm going to create a component which is going to be called menu item. So each link on the navigation will be a component. So the way I'm going to do that is by wrapping this resources text in a stack. So the way I do that is by either right-clicking and then clicking add stack. But you can also see we have a shortcut for that, which is Option, Command and Enter. So I'm going to hit that because it's much faster. Option, Command and Enter, you can see now the resources text is wrapped within this stack, which now has width fill, which is not really what I want. I want this stack to always resize its width to fit the text layer within. So let's set the width to fit content. So now if I change the text within, the stack also nicely adopts. Perfect. Then I'm going to rename this to menu item. I'm going to also write tuto there because I might have a component in the project named just like this. And yeah, menu item tutorial. Within that we have text. Maybe we want to set the height from fit to a fixed value of 34 just to make sure that it's a little bit larger. And then yeah, that's it. We can turn this stack into a component now. So either right-clicking and creating a component here, or again, shortcut, Option, Command and K. So Option, Command and K, new component will be created. You can name it here and just click create. Here you'll see the component canvas. This is basically where you define how your component will look and what different variants it will have. By default, you have a primary variant that's called variant 1. Let's call it default. And you can see that you can either create new variants if you click here, or hover/press states for the currently selected variant. I'm going to do that. I'm going to click hover and create a hover state where the color of this text layer will be changed to white. So now what you're going to notice is that as soon as I hover over this, I see that nice hover color. However, what I don't really like is if I double click this and start clicking, I can select the text. This is usually not a great experience on interactive elements. So to prevent that, I can select the text layer on the primary default variant. It's really important to do it on the primary, because if I, for example, do a modification only on the default hover state, it will only be applied here. But I want to make a change now that is applied on both the default primary and then the default hover state, because this will be a style on the right panel after selecting the text layer, which is called user select. I'm going to set it to none. This means that this text layer will no longer be selectable, even if we are in the hover state and even if we are on the default state. It's not selectable. I'm clicking it. It's not getting selected. Really, really good. Now, if we go back to the canvas, we can just click here, tutorial. We're now back here. We can duplicate this menu item a couple of times to have multiple different links. But the problem with this will be that I cannot really set different text on each of these, because if I double click one of them, go ahead and change the text within, all of them change, which is, actually, this is why components are good. If I change it on the component, it changes in all instances. But what if I want to change some of these properties within the component individually for each component instance. In this case, I want to have different text on each of these component instances, and then I want to leave all the rest of the properties, nicely the same across all of the instances. So if I decide I want to change the color, I can just change it on the main component and it changes everywhere. So how do I make sure that we have the title as a customizable property? Well, we can go within the component, select our text again on the primary, and on the right panel, we can select the content. And this is the property that changes, what is written on the text layer. And it has this little plus button next to the content label, and it also changes the color when I hover over. This basically means that I can click it and I can create a variable. Now this will be a plain text variable. I can also name it here, which will be a label. And now if I go back, you'll see that for each of these instances, I now have a label property on the right panel that I can change really easily. So we're going to have lesson and support. Now this is good, but this is not clickable. At least it is, but it's not really going to take us to a new web page. So to do that, based on the things that we learned, we can create a link property as well, a variable. So I can select the default primary variant, not the text layer written, but the complete variant. So even if I hover over this area, it will, trigger. So I can click here and I will still go to that new page, which is better compared to only linking from the text layer because the touch target will be a little bit bigger, so it's easier to click. That's actually why I like creating these menu items instead of just linking from text. I'll go to the top right after selecting default primary, link, and again, link to, you can see it has this little plus. I can click, create variable, and now it has a link variable. I can go back and again, set the link here on the right panel. Maybe I'm gonna link to starter, then this to tutorial, and maybe this to home. Perfect. Now we have all of these links. All of them say something else. They have different labels, and they also have different links. However, just to recap, still if I want to change the color, I can just simply go within the component and change the color here to red, and it will update on all components. That's why it's really good to use components, easy to maintain, easy to keep it scalable, but still you can create variables for certain properties that you want to change individually across different component instances. So let's switch back to gray and let's move on with the tutorial. So these links will essentially be grouped together because they are together, they should move together. So I'm going to select all of them and we're going to use a shortcut that we learned already, Option Command and Enter, which is adding a stack. So Option Command and Enter, as you can see now, these are wrapped within a stack here on the left layers panel. I can rename these to links, and I can also make sure that again, the width is not really fill. I don't really want it to fill up the available space. I want it to fit the content within, which are these links or menu items. Then if I drag these little lines here, I can change the gap between these items, or on the right panel, adjust the layout properties, which are essentially defining how these relatively positioned elements within the stack are positioned. You can also change the direction, distribute, whatever. You can play around with this if you want to. But yeah, I'm going to change the gap to something a little bit bigger, maybe 40. And then I'm going to also make this navigation a little bit larger because realistically, it will be a little bit bigger. So maybe 1200. Great. So what we have so far is a logo, links, and that's it. So another element that we're going to need within the navigation is a button. So the button will also be a component because I want to have a hover state for the button. And the button is also an element that will be repeating on my website, probably a bunch of times. So it's better to keep it a component because then it will later be a little bit easier to maintain. If I want to change the color, radius, or whatever, I can just change it once on the component and it will update on all instances. So pressing down T on my keyboard, clicking here on the canvas, and writing start now. this will be the label. I don't know why it's red. I don't really like this, so I'm gonna change it to black. Or maybe I'm gonna do white, and then we're gonna have like a little bit of gray color around the button. So how do we make sure that it has like a background color? We can first of all just adjust the properties on the right panel. I'll set the weight to semi-bold, and I think that's all I have to adjust here. And now I can wrap this in a stack. So again, same shortcut, Option, Command and Enter. And by the way, if there are some Figma users here who are really used to pressing Shift and A to create auto layout in Figma, which is essentially the same thing as stacks in Framer, then I have a great news for you. In Framer now we also have Shift and A as a shortcut for adding a stack. So Option, Command and Enter and Shift and A is basically the same thing. So I'm going to do it right now. Select the text, Shift A, and now we can see a stack has been added. Really nice. I will set this stack to width, fit and height 34. And I'll set the right and left padding. So on the right panel under layout, I can click this little icon here. And the right will be 14 and the left side padding will also be 14. You can see how these like padding values are added on the left and on the right. And then I will go to the right panel, fill. I'll set a gray fill color. I'm not even sure which should it be. Maybe this 800. And then I'll round its corners fully. So I'm just rounding its corners, and yeah, it's fully rounded now. So I'll rename this stack actually to button tutorial, because I probably have another button inside of this project. And then I think it's time to turn it into a component. Option, Command and K, and hitting enter. Now we see the same component canvas that we explored a couple minutes ago. So we can rename this variant one to default, and then we can similarly just create a hover state and maybe just go to styles, filter, brightness, and just drop it to, I don't know, 60. Now if I hover over, this will drop its opacity, but if I double click or start clicking, the text is selectable. Again, small thing that we have to fix on the primary variant, setting user select to none on the text. Great. Let's add the same link variable here that we did for the menu items. Create variable for the link. And now we have this. Actually, we can also create, a label property. So I'm selecting the start now text. On the right panel content, clicking the plus button, create variable plain text, renaming it to label. Back on the canvas, I can just drag this inside of the content frame that is placed within the navigation. And now essentially we might think that we have all of the elements that we need inside of the navigation. Yes, you might be right, because when we look at the desktop version of this component, this navigation, you can see that, yeah, we have a logo, we have a couple of links, and then we have a button. However, what you'll have to think about right now is that how it is going to look on mobile, how we're going to optimize this for smaller breakpoints. Let's start resizing this and see what happens. As you can see, a new item, a new element has appeared here as we entered a smaller viewport that is a little bit closer to phone, where we might not have enough space for all the links to appear right next to each other. So this hamburger menu is added here now, that I can click to open this navigation and display all of the links, which hamburger menu actually transitions into a close icon when I click it. So if we think about it, we might need to add this little hamburger menu here on this navigation. So already, even though we're designing just the desktop version, we have to think that we'll need an element on the phone variant or on the phone version of the component. So we already have to add it here. We're gonna hide it, but it is going to be within the content frame. Let me show you how I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna just draw a frame. I'm gonna do the hamburger menu with like frames. So pressing the F on my keyboard, drawing a frame. It's going to be 34 by 34. Remove the fill color. This doesn't really need to be a stack, so I'm not going to turn it into a stack. I'm going to just rename it to menu. And then I'm going to draw another frame within. It's going to be 14 width and 2 height. The color will be something like this, maybe 500. Then I'm going to put it here, press down Option on my keyboard, drag it, and then just select both of them and try centering them. Hopefully I can do that. They don't really seem to be centered. Yeah, maybe now. If you select one of these elements and press down Option on your keyboard, you can measure the distance. So now you can see that it's 11 to the top. If I select this, you can see it's 11 to the bottom. So now these are nicely centered. Now that I have this hamburger menu, which I might feel like they have a little bit more space here that we would need. So let's move this one up by 1 pixels and this down by 1 pixel with just the arrow keys. And now, if you think about it, this can also be a component. So right click, create component, or option component K. And here we can actually rename this to hamburger. Now we can actually explore how we create a new variant, because we have explored hover states, but we have not explored variants. So we can click here, create new variant, and we can call this close, where these elements here will just transition to new positions. So first of all, they're going to be rotated. So essentially what we want to do is form an X. So rotate both and then center them. So how do we center them really easily with shortcuts? I'm pressing Option H to center it horizontally, which is already centered horizontally, so it's not really doing anything. But then I also press Option and V, which is centering it vertically. So if I press Option H and V quickly right after each other, I'll see it centered perfectly. So I have a cross here, a close icon, and now what will essentially happen is that when I set these different variants of the navigation component, you're going to see it really soon, the point is that it's going to be animated. So it's not just going to jump into the X, it's going to be nicely animated. We can also take a look at this really quickly. I'm going to connect an interaction from this with that little icon, and it's going to happen on appear essentially automatically after 1 second delay, and it's going to be really small, so you might not even see it. But yeah, I'm going to ask Noel to zoom in a little bit here, and you're going to see that it is actually animating to the X. But yeah, we can remove this interaction. I just wanted to show it to you. It is animated. That's by components are also great. You can create different variants and you can smoothly animate between them. So now this menu is created and it can be placed within this little navigation component, which is not yet a component, but actually we're going to turn it into a component really soon. So now we just have to start thinking about a little bit, what are the different groups that we have within this content frame? We already have one group, which is the links. It's really good. We have the button here on the right, and we have the logo and the menu. So what you have to notice is that these two need to be grouped together, because when we switch to the phone variant, we'll see that the logo and the menu is in the same row right here. So they are kind of in the same group. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select both of these, the SVG, so the logo and the menu, and press Option, Command, and Enter on my keyboard. This wraps them in a stack. I'm going to call it logo plus menu. To make sure that this logo and the menu is on the left, I'm going to set distribute to start, so they start at the start of the stack. And then to make sure that these elements are not right here, I want these links to be centered, I need to wrap the button into a stack. So Option, Command, and Enter again here, set the distribute to end. Sorry, it didn't really do anything. It's actually a great thing because now we're going to learn how this actually works. So essentially now the direction is vertical. So distribute start means top of the stack, distribute end means bottom of the stack, which actually doesn't really do anything here because the height is fitting the actual button. So if we want this to make a little bit more sense, we can either switch direction to horizontal. So now distribute end means the right side of the container, because the direction is now horizontal. So start is on the left, end is on the right. Or we can also keep direction vertical, have distribute, let's say center, and use the alignment tools to align it to the left or right. But I'm going to use direction, horizontal, and end distribute. The point is that now, since we have both of these elements on the left and the right on fill width, they are both pushing, these links together, so they end up being in the perfect center of the navigation. Really great. One extra thing that we have to pay attention to is the fact that these are touching the edges here, the logo and the button. To make sure that it's not really doing that, we have to select the content frame, and we have to add padding on the left and the right. So it's going to be 20 and 20 on both sides. So now we have a little bit of space right there. Great. So I think that's it. One extra thing that we also have to do, again, this is just thinking into the future. We have to make sure that this button here will also be visible right next to the menu. So right now it's here, but if I go here, now it's next to the menu. So if you think about it, here, this is our menu here. It's within the logo plus menu, but the button is in a completely different stack. So how do I want to move it from here to here on the phone variant? We're not really going to be able to do that. So we have to again kind of prepare for that change by duplicating this and just copying it with Command and X and just pasting it within the logo plus menu. And then what we can actually also do is we can group the button and the menu in the same container or like stack, because they will be moving together. They will be on the right side of the screen and the logo will be on the left. So again, you see that it's just a bunch of preparation already here on the base of this like navigation component, just to make sure that it will be really easy for us to later make sure that it's optimized for smaller devices. So I'm selecting button and menu, hitting Option Command Enter on my keyboard. And now this creates a stack. I can call this button plus menu. And then I'll set these to width fit. And I'll just simply set the button. Actually, I'm just going to simply set the button plus menu stack to visible now, so they are not visible. So on desktop, I just see a regular desktop navigation, but in reality, I already have a bunch of prepared content and elements hidden, waiting for us to, activate them on the smaller breakpoints. So now we have this navigation here. What I don't really like about this is that if I start adjusting this, you can see how the logo starts getting to the far left side and this button to the far right side of this navigation. This is not great in my opinion, because if someone has a really large monitor, then it's going to be really like stretched. So in order to fix this, I have this content frame here, which I created exactly for this reason, to then be able to add a max width only on this element. So the navigation is still able to fill up the available space, but the content within is set to max width, let's say 1000 pixels. So it's not growing bigger than 1000 pixels, containing the elements within the navigation into this nice 1000 pixel max width size. Then I also noticed that the content is set to fixed height, which I can simply set to fit content, so it fits the content within. It's a much better setup. Cool, so now just resize this so it has a size that makes sense. I'm gonna put it here, and before putting it inside of the page, we'll actually turn it into a component and prepare some of the variants that we'll need for this navigation. So right click, create component, press enter. So here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna rename it to default, and on the right panel, we're gonna add accessibility tag nav. So in Framer and basically on all websites, it's really important to have the right HTML tag for all of your elements. For example, if you have a navigation, it needs to be nav. If you have a footer, it needs to be footer. And yeah, you can look up some of these like HTML tags and where they should be used. This video is about navigation, so I'm just going to tell you nav is used in navigation, and make sure that you set this. Now we can just simply go ahead and jump into creating the phone variant. So I'm clicking here and creating that super cool phone variant. I'm going to rename this to phone open, because this variant will be the state where we are in the phone variant and it is opened down. So we already clicked the menu and we see our links. So I'm going to change actually the width of this component to 390, because that's the size that we see on mobile. So that's the breakpoint size of the mobile. You can see that this is not really looking great. So that's actually why we need to optimize this. So let's see what are some of the things that we can do. First of all, I'm going to set the phone open, this complete variant, to vertical direction and distribute start. Then I'm going to make sure you can now see that the content frame has jumped to the top. And now these are not really centered. If I draw a line here from the center of the button, you can see that it's not really getting centered with these elements right here. So in order to fix this, I'll set the height of the content frame to the same height that we had on this default primary variant of the navigation, which is 60 pixels. So content will be resized to 60 pixels fixed height here. Now you can see that everything is nicely aligned. Everything looks cool. Next step is to glue a layer within to the content. Here we'll set these to vertical direction. Now it's horizontal, so all elements that we placed within the content is placed right next to each other horizontally. If I simply switch it to vertical, now everything will be right below each other. Really great. What is not really great is that I can't really see them. So first of all, what we have to notice is that these elements, you see some of them overflow on the bottom, some of them overflow on the top. So in order to fix this, I want to make sure that everything starts at the top of the stack. So the distribute will not be centered, because actually now it's trying to center all the content that is within itself. We'll set this distribute to start, so the logo starts at the top perfectly. I actually just realized that I made a mistake, because not the content frame will be the one that I set to height 60 pixels, because the content frame will actually have to grow, because it will open this down, this navigation. So the content frame will actually be fit content, and then to make sure that the logo here, this is the problem here, that this is now not centered within this 60 pixel size here. As you can see, it's just here on the top. That's why we have to set not the content but the logo plus menu to 60 pixels. So now, as you can see, it is nicely right here in the same line, and I can set the button plus menu to visible, and you can now see that that's how we kind of grabbed these elements that we prepared and put it on the phone open variant to make sure that they are positioned a little bit better. Logo on left, rest on the right. We can set a specific distribute property here, which is space between. Essentially, it distributes elements in a way that, for example, if we have two elements within, one will be on the left and the other one will be on the right. If we have another one, it will be just right in between these two other items, but we don't have another item. So now this is great. We have all of these things. Now we cannot really see the links that are right here, because the phone open variant is actually height 60 pixel fixed. So it's not really adapting to its content. So I can just set the height here to fit content. So now it adapts really nicely. What we immediately notice here is that we have duplicate buttons. So we quickly disable this. But before I do that, I just want to show you that this was the problem that we would have faced if we didn't make this hidden button right from the start. Because we would have seen this and we could have, placed it here so we can only see it when the menu is opened. But I want to position it right next to navigation, and you just cannot move it from here to there. It's just not possible, unfortunately. So yeah, here I'm going to just set it to visible now. It's not visible anymore. And then the links, of course, will be placed right below each other. So direction vertical on the right panel. Then I might change the width to fill so it fills up the available space. And I can also make sure that the links has alignment to the left. So these are here on the left, and maybe the gap is a little bit decreased. Maybe they have like 20 pixels between each other. Then I can also select the content frame and change the gap here. So maybe we want to have 26. And we can also set a button padding on the content, so we have some space below the menu items. So then I actually don't really like that these are so small here. So I want to have a little bit bigger text on here on the phone open. So for that, we can actually go inside of the menu item component and create a new variant. Here we can resize the text within to 34, let's say. We can also change the font to intertight. I don't really see intertight here, which is funny because I thought it's in here. Okay, no worries. We can also just decrease the letter spacing here, and it will be a little bit tighter. And yeah, we can just change the text color to white, because on phone we will not really have a hover state, so it can just be white by default. And I'll set the height to fit content, and this will be called phone. So we'll know that this variant is for the phone. So what I will do is I'll select all of these and just simply switch their variant to phone. And that's it. Now these items are the same, they say the same things, they're linked to the same website, but they just appear a little bit differently because we are displaying a different variant. Okay, so now let's take a last look at this phone open. Is there anything else that we have to change? Yes, I think we have to. First of all, this icon here should not be the hamburger, but the close, because we already have an opened state here. So when we click this, we want to close it. And then also what I want to do here is just a small tweak. I want to make sure that this button is actually not visible here, only when we are in the phone closed state. So these are not visible here. So I'll set the opacity to 0. And what we will see is that even though it's 0 opacity, I can still click it. So when I hover over, I have my pointer cursor, which I really hope that the Screen Studio like recording software is recording properly. But if not, believe me, I have my pointer cursor as I'm hovering over this area, so I can still technically click it. So in order to prevent that, I can also set pointer events to none. So now if I hover over, I'll no longer see that pointer cursor, meaning I no longer can click it. Then when we switch to another variant where we want to click it, we will just set it back to pointer events auto. Great, so phone open is done. Let's create a new variant based on this phone open. Click here and call this phone close or closed. Great, so now here what we're going to do is we're going to remove the links. So just set their opacity to 0. And again, if we just simply set the opacity to 0, we can still click them. So in order to make sure that we're not clicking them accidentally, we're setting also the pointer events to none on these right here. Then we reveal the button. So we're going to set the opacity to 1 and pointer events back to auto, so we can actually click this button. And then the menu will be in the hamburger variant. Pretty good. And then we'll just have to resize this variant so it has the 60 pixel navigation size that we defined right from the start. And that's basically it. As you can see, since we had a great structure, a great base, we were able to optimize this with different variants really easily. However, now if we click this, nothing really happens. So we have to still add the interactions. Super easy. I'm just clicking the close icon here. I also have this connector which I can drag or press down L on my keyboard to link to a different variant. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm saying that when an action happens on that specific element on the X, we transition to a new variant. So when I click the X, I go to phone closed. This is where I, by the way, define the trigger. So it's either mouse enter, appear. What is the trigger? It's going to be click. And yeah, I'll just click here on the canvas and this interaction now will be applied. So if I preview this with Command and P and click here, we go and transition to the phone closed. Perfect. However, if I click here, we don't go back, so we have to still add that. I'll just drag, connect, and that's it. Now if I click here, nicely transitions back and forth between the opened and closed variants. Okay, so now that we have all of these little variants inside of our component, we can consider this done and finally start inserting this into our page. So this navigation component will be grabbed. What I usually do is I press Command and X on my keyboard. This essentially removes the element from this canvas, it cuts it, however it also places it on my clipboard so I can easily paste it somewhere else. So I'll select the desktop breakpoint here and press Command and V on my keyboard. This will place it to the bottom of the page as a relative positioned element, and I can just set or just reorder it, so I'm just pressing the top arrow key, so now it's on the top of the website. You might say that, okay, it looks pretty cool, I can just scroll, it disappears, but maybe that's fine for you. However, it is not really recommended to use navigation with relative positioning. Reason why I say that is because it will not really look great on phone. I'm going to show you in a minute. Before that, I'll just quickly set the width to fill, and let me show you how it looks on phone. First of all, in order to see the phone variant on phone, we'll have to set phone open, sorry, not phone open, phone closed variant here. So let me see. If I click here to open it down, first of all, first thing, it's not really opening down. It's not because it's relative, it's an unrelated issue. It's because the height here is set to fixed. So we have a component which is on the canvas as a component instance. It has a fixed height, so even though we transition to a variant which has a larger height, it will not follow that because it says, no, I'm an instance on the canvas, I have fixed height defined on the right panel, I'm not going to change myself. I will be 60 pixels forever. That's not great for us, of course. We'll have to set the fit height, which basically will mean that it will always fit the height of the current variant. So I'll do that, of course, on the primary breakpoint because I want to, change this property on all variants, desktop, tablet, and phone. So here I'm going to set it to fit content height. Now if I go here, click this, it nicely opens down. But now we see the issue that relative positioning gives us, which is the fact that as I click it, content is being pushed down, layout shifts are happening. So actually this is one of the things I wanted to mention in a next section, which is the positioning issues. But yeah, it seems like I'm mentioning it here. Whatever. So basically the way we can prevent this from happening is by making sure that this little navigation is not relative but fixed. So here on the desktop breakpoint, I'm going to set this to fixed, and I'll pin it to the left, right, and top with 0 pins. This essentially means that it will fill up the available width and will always be sticking to the top of the page, or viewport more accurately, because it will no longer scroll away. As I scroll down, it will basically just stay on the top of my page, which is exactly what I wanted actually. And now if I go here and I open it down, the content is no longer being pushed away, which is pretty good. Actually, at this point, I might just bring that next section that should happen next to here and talk about some of the issues that beginners usually come across. So one of those were the positioning issues that I just talked about. So instead of relative, use fixed positioning to avoid these layout shifts. The other one is a z-index issue, which we can already see here, by the way, because I think remember that we set this black background that we can actually see here as I'm scrolling here, but when I scroll here over this purple area, it's not really there. Where is that black background? Well, the problem is that now this navigation is not on top of all the content that is on the page. So some of the contents are scrolling over the navigation and some of the contents are scrolling below the navigation. What we want to make sure is that all content is scrolling below the navigation. So I'm selecting the navigation and I'm defining a specific z-index on the right panel. If it's not added, you can click here and add z-index. The higher the z-index, the more on top it will be. So essentially, if we have an element with z-index 1, another element with z-index 2, the z-index 2 element will be above the z-index 1 element. So the highest z-index that we can set inside of Framer is 10. So I usually like doing 9 for the navigation, just in case we want to have something over the navigation, maybe like an overlay, or I don't know, we can, still have that. So let's use 9. And now as we scroll down, you see that even if we are here on the purple area, our navigation background is nicely visible because now that is the layer that is on top of everything on our website. Okay, so now back to this section that I actually started, where I was explaining that, okay, now we are inserting it into our page, which looks really nice. However, we might run into an issue because, okay, very good. Now we have a navigation on one of our pages, but what if we have like 50 pages? What do we have to do then? Well, unfortunately, you would need to copy and paste this on all of your different pages, which is not really what you want. If you have like 50 or I don't know, like many pages, this is not going to be a great experience for you. So that's why Framer introduced layout templates, which essentially allows you to create more scalable websites by defining fixed elements that repeat on all pages where this layout template is being applied to. Let me show you how that's done. Now that we have the navigation here, I can just right click it and click create layout template. So now we're creating a layout template with this element. We can call this main tutorial. And now we can see that this is the layout template editor view. Really similar to the component editor view, but a little bit different. Even here in the assets panel, it has a different section. It's called templates. Here we have, the template section. These are layout templates and these are components. They are different things. This is the layout template editor view again. What is interesting here is that we have a placeholder here. You can see that this is a placeholder frame here in the layers panel as well. This is not removable. So if I'm pressing like backspace, I can just cannot delete it or do anything with that. And this placeholder makes this layout template actually a little bit more interesting compared to components, because what we can do is we can go back to this tutorial. I can select the desktop breakpoint, and on the right panel you can now see that this layout template is being applied to this page, to this breakpoint. Now what this means is that now the navigation is here, it's visible on the page, but for some reason in the layers panel I cannot see it. I can see the footer, I can see the main, which houses all the sections, but I cannot see the navigation. Where is that? Well, it's part of the layout template, that's why I cannot see it. It's a fixed element that I defined within the layout template, and if I want to change it, I can change it here, but then on each page where it's applied, it will just be applied as a layout template and not as an element here on the layers panel. Why is this great? Well, because if we have 50 pages, let's say we have the starter, you're going to have this empty, but I will just want to show it to you. So I'm going to apply here template. I applied the same main tutorial here. So now I have two pages that have the same layout template. Both of the navigation, on both pages the navigation is there. If I want to change the navigation, remove it, resize it, maybe just change the position, move it down here, I just have to do it once and it will update everywhere. Just have to do it once in the layout template, updates everywhere. Before I had to go on each page and do the movement. Not really great. So you can see that now on starter page, it's moved down right here, and on the tutorial page, moved down. Pretty cool. So let's move it back to the top and also remove this layout template from the starter. So back to this tutorial page. Another thing is that the placeholder is where the page content goes. So if I nest elements within the desktop, they will be placed within the content frame that is defined here. Yeah, I think that's it. Usually you want to also, by the way, move your footer within the layout template. So I'm going to also do it quickly, even though this video is not about that. But I just want to do that as well. So I'm just going to paste it within here. So now all I have within this desktop, the only thing that I see, sorry, is the main container with all the sections. I cannot see the navigation and footer because they are defined on the layout template. However, now the responsiveness is not really there. So let's fix that. I'm going to double click the navigation so we go within the layout template. And here we can specify breakpoints just like on, right here on the page level. So let's do that. Tablet and phone breakpoints are being added. And I just simply change the variant here to phone closed. And then here, this is already phone, the footer component. So that's pretty good. So now it will be responsive. You can see here, it changes to the phone closed variant. So if I resize this window, you're going to see I can open it down nicely. Okay, so now let's cover another thing that usually beginners are asking, which is, okay, we created this component. It has a desktop, a phone closed and phone open variants. But what if I want to have a navigation on the phone, which actually takes up the available height within the viewport? Because now I agree, it might look a little bit weird here because yeah, it just doesn't take up the available space. It's right here. We can still see the hero text here, kinda. So it would be maybe a little bit more of a cleaner experience to just fill up the available space, focus on the items within the navigation. So how do we do that? Well, it's really simple. We go within this component, and then here on the phone open variant, we're gonna add another property, a new property here. It will be a min height, which will be set to 100 VH. Let's just see what this does. It will basically mean that now the phone open variant has a minimum height, so it cannot be smaller than this, and this value is 100 VH. You might not know what VH is, so I'm going to tell you now. VH is viewport height. So 100 VH means 100% of the viewport height. What is the viewport height? Basically, we have a screen, what is this? A monitor or like a phone or whatever. It has a screen and it has a height. Well, that is the viewport height. I can also go here and I can show you, this is when I'm resizing the viewport height. This is when it's changing. If an element is set to 100 VH, it will nicely resize with the viewport. So if I change again to the phone and I open this down now, you see it takes up the available space. If I resize this, it is being resized with it. Really good. Now, there is a little issue though. If I decrease the opacity of the background on this little navigation, we're gonna actually see that. If I go here and open it down, I can still now a little bit better see the content behind. If I start scrolling down here, I can scroll on the page, which is a little user experience. It's not really great in terms of user experience. So to fix this, we're gonna actually utilize a Framer University component. So let me show you how you can do that. Because, you might be able to do this natively, this full height navigation, but you cannot really do the scroll blocking natively with this setup. So that's why I created the scroll stopper component. If you go to Framer University, search on the resources page for stopper or stop, you can find the sorry, it's a little bit late here. So scroll stopper component, copy it with this little button, and just jump back to Framer. Now what we're gonna do with this component is we're gonna paste it within the default primary variant. So we're gonna already have it here on the desktop variant. Command V, as you can see now, it's pasted within the links, which I don't really want to do. I want to just nest it here on the default primary variant. It's not even within the content, and it's actually going to be positioned absolutely, because now you can see it's pushing the content a little bit. So if it's absolute, then it's going to be outside. It's not really going to be part of the flow. And so it's not pushing anything. It's not really doing anything. It's like just an invisible component. You can see that now that we pasted this within, there's a little issue, which is that we can't really scroll on the page because we have a navigation on the top of the website, which has a block scroll component within, which is blocking the scroll. That's obviously not really great. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the navigation, and we'll set the stop scroll here within the primary default desktop variant to block scroll no. So on the right panel, we can switch the block scroll property to yes or no. And on desktop, it's of course going to be no. On phone closed, it's going to be no, because we can, still scroll when it's closed on phone. The only place where I want to make sure that it's blocked is on phone open. So on phone open, I'm going to go click stop scroll, and on the right panel, I'll switch it to yes. Block scroll is now yes. Go back to the page and let's take a look at this. I'll start scrolling. I can scroll, really nice. Let's resize this window and let's click this again, and I cannot scroll. Really good. If I close this, I can scroll. Pretty cool. Now let's enter the last section on this little video, which I said will be quick, and I didn't really know that it's not gonna be quick, but who cares if we're learning, right? So last section, navigation effects. So the most common effect that we see on navigations is that when you start scrolling on the page, it moves up, so it like disappears, and then when you start scrolling back to the top, it like moves down. So how do we create something like this? So essentially we're going to go within the layout template. We're going to select the navigation component, and we can go on the right panel and assign an effect to this navigation, which is going to be scroll animation. Here on the scroll animation, we can define a trigger, and the trigger will actually be on scroll. So here we can define that, okay, on scroll down, something will happen. Well, that something will be defined here on the to state. So on the to state, let me just grab this opacity and set it to 1. Let's think about what will happen if I start scrolling down. Essentially, Y offset will be applied to the navigation. So you notice how it's moving to the top as I adjust this Y offset. That's exactly what we are gonna do. Actually also know the height of the navigation, 60 pixels, so we can just set -60, and that's it. It's fully moved to the top. We can also change how it does this movement. We can set the bounce to 0, maybe it's a little bit slower, 0.5 for the time. And we can also set the opacity to 0 if we want to do that. I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that the whole time it's visible, it just moves up, and that's it. And yeah, we can now take a look at this. In theory, as we scroll down, it should disappear and move to the top. Let's see. As I scroll down, it disappears, moves to the top, and as I start scrolling back to the top, it comes back. Really, really nice. Again, and this navigation bar just keeps moving to the top and then back within our viewport. So yeah, that's it for this video. Now you know a lot of things about navigations in Framer. If you followed along with this video, I'm really hoping that now you really are able to create these responsive navigation bars from complete scratch. And yeah, you can just build your own ones for your pages, for your templates, for your client sites, whatever. If you have any questions still after this video, don't feel weird. It's normal. I might be teaching in a weird way. I might be forgetting to do or explain something. So please just help me out and write down in the comments if you have any questions, because it helps me teach better and it helps you because you will get an answer. So yeah, make sure to do that. And also go to Framer University, check out the resources, the tutorials, and other cool stuff that I have there. I also have support sessions, which I don't really mention like ever, but yeah, There you go. I have support sessions. You can schedule calls with me if you need dedicated help and support. You can also find that at Framework University. And yeah, I think that's it for this video. Make sure to like this, subscribe for more, and I'm going to see you in the next one.